wanted to be a visible representation of a successful creative dyslexic.
Yeah.
So that other people coming up behind me can have something to work with and say, okay, yep, she's been able to do that. She's taken this path and it's been a successful path. So that was really important for me.
Hi, Kim. It's so funny.
Hi, Susan.
How are you?
Good. I'm good.
We're sitting here basically as we would, as per usual, having a cup of tea. Perhaps not quite so close. With a few friends that have come along for the ride. Everyone, this is... Are you Dr. Kim Percy yet? Soon to be. Where are we at with
I am still waiting for my the assessors to come back with feedback. So no,
okay.
I'm just...
You're in limbo.
I'm limbo. I'm limbo Kim.
Limbo Kim.
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of in this weird space that's not one thing, it's not another thing, and yeah, it's quite a strange kind of sensation. I think the word I keep using is untethered.
Yes.
And so I feel like I'm kind of floating in this kind of nebulous space at the moment.
Yeah. So to catch everyone up, Kim and I have sat at this table many times with this cup of tea, particularly over the last few months as you were finishing your PhD. She did have a studio just up the hallway over there. So I really miss having Kim around so much. But I'm glad that you've at least got another spot at the uni for now.
Yes, I've got a hot desk.
But I had to talk to you, and this is sort of like a bit of an experimental thing, because this will of course be a podcast which I've had for many years.
Yes.
But we wanted to do a video to capture the moment with your exhibition. So we'll have this chat and there'll be some beautiful vision as we're talking of your exhibition, which is on right now down at the Post Office Gallery, which is just downstairs here on Sturt Street in Ballarat.
Yep.
It's the Post Office Gallery is the gallery of Federation University, where we both what are you? I don't know.
I don't know.
Where you are sort of nearly graduated with your PhD and soon to be Dr. Kim Percy. But I had to have you on because your research PhD is so relevant to so many people that have listened to my podcast for a long time. I would love you to talk about what your PhD is about. So I don't butcher your topic because you speak so eloquently about it.
My title is Visualizing the Invisible, an investigation into dyslexia through the lens of visual art. My journey started, I suspected I was dyslexic because my youngest son was diagnosed when he was 7. And through that process, I found that I wanted to know more about what is dyslexia. Because you look it up and people go, oh, you can't read. I read really well. Okay, so
it's often the case, like with so many women in all the neurodiversities, often don't exhibit classic symptoms. Same with ADHD. Like a lot of women do not exhibit like a classic bouncing off the walls, hyperactive ADHD. So similar thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so I've been wanting to do my PhD for quite some time, and I kept knocking on the door. Hi, I'd like to do my PhD, and eventually I managed to knock on the right door at the right time. And I thought one of the things about looking into dyslexia is that often the conversation is dyslexics are more creative. And I thought, all right, I want to know a bit more about that. Is that true? Are we more creative? What is creativity? That's the whole pack of words. So first thing, I went and got assessed, and yes, I'm dyslexic. I was like, yay.
So did you decide to research this before you had your own diagnosis? Right.
Yes.
So you obviously had a bit of a suspicion.
I did.
Yeah.
And diagnosis process for me was part of my beginning of the research.
How juicy, because it's such a big thing to unpack a diagnosis.
Yeah. It was really interesting going through it because I'd gone through it with my younger son, so I knew a bit about the process from his perspective, and then to go through the process myself, and it was a journey that I wasn't unfamiliar with, and I could see what it was doing and how it was working because I did have a whole lot of research already behind me. So it was kind of I understood quite a bit about the questions that were being asked. I was informed beforehand of what to expect.
Yeah, and you've also been in a research space for quite some time because you'd previously done your master's. You've taught here at Federation University, previously University of Ballarat, for how many years? Like 15 or something? 15 years.
Yeah.
So, you're a person that's familiar with that research environment.
Yeah.
But I know that you've spoken about this at other talks that I've been to that you've given throughout the exhibition happening about this subject of disclosure, because I imagine like you're going on this intense internal process yourself around diagnosis, which I'm familiar with as well from my own experience. But you're also in a professional environment where you had to make a decision about if you were going to disclose to others your diagnosis, because it was a little bit unknown as to how that might impact your employment or many aspects. So, talk us through that, because I know you ended up making work about it as well. And I think this is the brilliant thing, right, about practice-led research or practice-based research. What are you led?
I consider it practice-based research.
I lean in that direction too. But that is a nerdy conversation.
I know we could do that, couldn't we?
We totally could do that, and I think we should. Because there's a lot of people really curious about this area.
Yeah.
So talk us through that element, because I think maybe that even might illustrate for the people here that are not familiar with, making art in a research context, that dance of deciding about, are you going to disclose, not disclose, making work, being in this cyclical process.
I think one of and I missed a keyword in my title. The keyword is absence, and looking at the invisible. So dyslexia, even though we're the largest section of neurodivergence, 50% of neurodivergents are dyslexic. Between 10 to 20% of the population is dyslexia. And in terms of creative practice, the research I've done, there is a lot more dyslexics in creative practice. When I started researching, I looked up Art Australia and dyslexia, and hardly any search results came up. I felt invisible. I didn't have anyone to look upon and say, they're like me, or they've walked through the path that I'm currently walking on. So when I came to thinking about disclosure, I didn't really have any role models to be able to talk to about it. The conversations I was having with colleagues who are dyslexic, who work in the research field, aren't necessarily creative. They're not working in that space. And so I felt that I really was stepping into the unknown. And I think that one was uncertainty, which is what I was trying to explain with the series I was doing called The Swing.
And we'll pop some vision in of the artworks. So we'll just cut in as we talk through the artworks, because the artworks are very congruent with your research topics that you covered in your written materials. So the kind of thesis that accompanies a visual art post-grad degree is called an exegesis at our institution, but it varies. So so you the swing, so capturing that motion.
So for me, the water represents the unconscious or the subconscious. So what was my subconscious telling me? What was I listening to? What was that emotional drive? The swing itself was that oscillation between should I disclose, should I not disclose? What does it mean? Will I have less opportunities career-wise if I disclose being dyslexic? Because there is still so much stigma associated with dyslexia. People still think that dyslexics are dumb, that we're not as smart, or we're not as capable, or we're going to make mistakes.
Yes.
So
a similar situation for all the neurodiversity.
It is. So countering that, or taking that into consideration, I went through a really big process, but it was also important for me to be that role model. I wanted to be a visible representation of a successful creative dyslexic.
Yeah.
So that other people coming up behind me can have something to work with and say, okay, yep, she's been able to do that. She's taken this path and it's been a successful path. So that was really important for me. So that oscillation of disclosure, which is an artwork that I made, which has two figures that are surrounding or circling each other like yin yang, and it's situated in water. So again, water comes up for me. It's an element that I use a lot to represent the subconscious, that as above, so below. What is the surface, what you're actually seeing underneath the surface. So I work a lot with metaphor, as well as working with the research. And when I say research, it was really important for me to explore neuroscience, explore education, explore mental health, to really understand what is dyslexia before I started to talk about what is my dyslexia.
And then creating data also through your own interviews that you conducted as part of the PhD.
Yeah, so anonymous, it was a survey of anonymous
right, okay.
Of people who identified as being dyslexic, because it's the other thing is a lot of people aren't diagnosed.
Yes.
They're people like myself who've gone through life fumbling away, masking, putting on all sorts of coping strategies and getting somewhere in life, and then realizing at some point either it doesn't matter anymore if I'm dyslexic or not, or finally getting a diagnosis. And I think that less people get a diagnosis as an adult with dyslexia, because if you've got that far, you've managed to get to a point where you can probably cope. Whereas ADHD and autism, we're finding there's a spike in adults.
Right, so it's different with dyslexia.
I think it is.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, because there are physiological factors. I mean, particularly as a woman that's been diagnosed with ADHD, and I have dyscalculia, which is the numbers version of dyslexia. And that was, I think it very much the hormonal shifts and changes, and this has happened for so many women that I know that have had that later in life diagnosis. That's the bit that has pushed us over the edge. Like, we've kind of cobbled it together for most of our lives, but then go into perimenopause.
Yeah.
The dopamine, the estrogen drops, it's codependent with dopamine, which is that deficient hormone that you have with ADHD, and then suddenly you can't cobble it together anymore.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
I think it does make sense, and I think that's why a lot of the research and a lot of the support and resources are all in that early development for dyslexia. And
well, because it's proven to work as well. And I know that because I have a dyslexic child. So, and we did that early intervention with her, and it made a massive difference. But yes, so they know that it actually works to get in there earlier, don't they?
It does, and I think that that's the difference. And there's still the emotional, the well-being, the mental health concerns as an adult, which does need to be tackled. But it's often it is not necessarily associated so closely with dyslexia. So the problems that you had as a child in school, often that once you actually get into adulthood, you're deemed as being capable. So it's a different experience. And people, though, I will say that a lot of dyslexics are underemployed for their capability.
So because an enormous amount have like PhDs and Masters Level Education and like high level jobs, and
some do, and I mean, my research,
but not necessarily reflected in employment, is what I'm saying. Like they, I don't know, am I wrong?
So what we're finding is that there's a huge, so the school to prison pipeline. So we're looking at about 50% of prison inmates with dyslexia.
Wow.
So it's huge. So we're getting a large proportion who don't actually end up in that professional.
Right, okay. So I've completely got the wrong end of the stick with that.
Not really, because I think that then you do end up with this kind of sort of core at the top. And I think that having that intervention as a young person, also having the support, that's why it's sometimes called a class disability.
Right.
Because if you've got the money,
yeah.
But, you know, that's only some stories. And I think that in creativity, that in art practice, being able to, there isn't as much emphasis put on your language-based literacy. So therefore, artists that tend to be able to sort of meander their way or find ways through the education system and actually end up with a degree or postgraduate degree. So, you know, there's many different factors.
It's a highly nuanced thing, which is why that it was so great that you did that research, because you were actually able to pinpoint different elements and how they play out, particularly with visual artists, because that was the focus of your project. I'm really interested to know about how, and I think also people listening to or watching this will maybe be curious as well, that dance between doing the research and creating the data and finding information or finding lack of information and the art making process. Can you tell us about that dance? Because I think it's very interesting, particularly as we talk about this disclosure element in terms of, do you think being in creative process with all of this information actually really helped you to move through that diagnosis and disclosure decision process?
Yeah, I think it did. And the reason why I think it did is that I chose very early on to, rather than concentrate on the deficits or the challenges, I wanted to look at what are the strengths of dyslexia.
Yeah,
and so shifting that that emphasis meant that I was able to start to look at, okay, what is it about dyslexia that enriches my art practice? And so that question helped me to reframe my own diagnosis. And also to look at my own art practice. So I was looking at my practice and saying, okay, these are the things that the attributes that I think make an artist. These are some of the attributes that I've researched that are coming through as being dyslexic. I can see correlation between them. So an example of that is many dyslexics, and of course this is all, everyone's going to be different, everyone's going to have different experiences, but many dyslexics are really good at visual spatial awareness. So that is being able to imagine spaces or imagine objects. So somebody with good visual spatial awareness is able to pick up an object and imagine what the entire object can look like without actually physically moving it around, or walk into a space and be able to rejig all the furniture in the space without actually physically moving things. So that those sort of skills or attributes are really handy as an artist. Another strength that I associate with dyslexia is narrative reasoning. So being able to remember things through story. So that storytelling, or that is strong attribute.
Which I have to say translates beautifully through this body of work that you've made for your exhibition. There's so much clarity there, and that's not always evident. I mean, it's never evident at the start of the project, is it? I mean, it isn't for me anyway. I don't know if do you experience that differently, do you think, as a dyslexic? Do you always have a pretty clear vision of where you were going with how you were going to tell this story?
Yes, and I think that that's one of the things that I would like to do a lot more research in. But for me, I have a very strong visual of what I want to do before I make it.
Okay.
So each of my, just explaining, my thesis or my exegesis is written in chapters, and each chapter follows a body of work, and each body of work or series of work is very different. So I've got painting, I've got photography, I've got video.
Yes, we should have talked about this right back at the start. Keep going, because you're a multimedia artist.
I am, yeah.
Yeah, so you've got paint. You keep going with the list. I should have said this right up at the start. She practices so many mediums.
So do.
So very well.
So I'm probably known more as a photo-based artist or an installation artist, but much to the surprise of a lot of people, actually paint as well. And yeah, I have made video, and each of these bodies or this series of work relates to a different question. So we've talked about disclosure, and I had the series of work called The Swing, which is a photographic series, and then I've got another body of work that relates to masking, which is called The Real Thing, which is a digital combine.
So cool.
So that means I've got photographic work, which are kind of sculptural. So they're in perspex frames, and they're kind of these sort of slithers or fractures of images.
Drop some video in here so you can see what we're talking about.
Yeah, and then behind that, because remember they're perspex, so you can see through to the wall behind, and I've written on the wall.
She literally was in the gallery writing text on the wall.
Yeah, with pencil. And then there's a small little image in there, which is just a portrait of me, my face. And when you hold your phone up with a particular app, it brings up an augmented reality. So it brings up a video in your phone. So the image itself is called a trigger image, and then the video comes up on your phone, which is the augmented reality. So this is together, this is called digital combine, which comes from the Robert Rauschenberg combines, where he combined sculpture and painting and various bits and pieces, but we're adding the digital element. It's also an NFT as well. So
of course it is. You do all things.
All these different things. Anyway, so this body of work is on masking and looking at what it is to add masking or passing. So in dyslexic terms, often in autism, we talk about masking, putting on a mask to appear to be neurotypical possibly, or to appear to be able to cope in different situations or to mimic. Whereas in dyslexic terms, it's sometimes called passing, which means that you pass on opportunities so you don't get shown up.
Right.
So
to avoid
situations.
situations.
Yeah, exactly.
And miss out on your life as a consequence.
Yeah, so masking is, so I wanted to talk about that and talk about the coping strategies that I have inadvertently done all my life without realizing. And so part of my process has been unpacking what those are.
Interesting. I love that body of work. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's called The Real Thing.
Yeah.
What is the real thing when you're faced with your own deceit or your own masking?
And that is often an extended process, I think, when you have a late in life diagnosis as well. Like you're constantly caught out by observing yourself in situations and behaving in quite an automatic way, and it revealing itself to you as, that's interesting. When did I start doing that? And what's that really about? Yeah. And then I guess that brings us to which came the clouds, the beautiful clouds with the circles. Was that the next body of work that came, or are they not necessarily in order? But I know that I got to know you mainly in the painting phase, and I feel like that was sort of to the end.
Yes.
So the clouds and the circles.
Yeah.
What's the story with those?
So one of the first projects I did was a video, and it was called Finding Difference. And it was me trying to make sense of realizing that I've always been slightly different from those around me. And I felt quite okay about that. But even when I was young, my tagline was dare to be different. So I'd always sort of taken that on as being part of my identity. So I created these video works, which was a circle of water, and behind that was more water. So it was the same image or same footage of water, and in the circle was a slightly different color, slightly different magnification of the same image. And the response was that it felt jarring and a bit sort of not so easy to look at, and a bit probably, I don't know, there was something that was a bit melancholy about it. So I wanted to make some works that felt optimistic, because I wanted to look at my future, and this was probably about midway through my PhD journey. And I wanted to make work that reflected the positive attribute that I feel about being dyslexic and about the research and the art practice. So they're beautiful, soft, warm colours.
It's so beautiful.
And it's also, circles appear often in my work, either as a circle, an image that's in a circle, or as circle upon things, different.
And often water.
Often water.
Like, I mean, you've done crazy exhibitions, like the lake exhibitions with the photographs literally on a lake.
Yeah,
Dalesford, and
so they floated like lily pads on the surface of the water.
So cool.
So this body of work, so the circle to me is about it's that wholeness, so that continual flow. When you have a circle, your eyes don't get caught in the corners.
That's true.
You're always beautifully sort of brought around. There's something very feminine about the circle, and it's also about the portal. So it's a portal seeing through to something else. And I think that as artists, that's part of what we do, is we open up portals.
It's true.
Into different spheres or different ways of seeing, or different realities.
In my mind, is the great strength of practice-based research, is that it creates a way of seeing the world, or seeing a particular phenomenon in the world that's different to what we're usually presented with. I love that work. And the other one that I loved is the video work with the water and the voices, the spoken word over the top, that was your research participants spoken by actors as an audio. Talk to us about that, because that's a beautiful what do we call that, a video?
Yeah, it's a video, So it's an installation. So I did all the videos are circular. So I have a circular screen that sits on the wall, and they're all, there's some sort of aspect of water, and often they have writing. So I've developed this thing called overwriting, where I start to write and then I just keep writing until the words are jumbled over each other and you no longer can see the words as such. It becomes this kind of just almost like lacework or lines. It just is continuous lines that kind of interact and jumble and weave itself in amongst. And so this overwriting, I start the process of writing and I just keep writing over. So you get these overlaps of water, the movement of water, with this writing that happens over the top. So that's one video. Sometimes I project onto water itself. So you get the projection of my paintings onto the waters and the ripples of the water so looking at different ways to express and the words. So you're absolutely right. So when I did the survey, I had spaces where people could make their own comments. And the survey is a lot of data, 50% do this and 70%. But what I wanted to know was about the actual comments that people made and how that's the humanizing
experience.
Absolutely. So
the thing that they want to say, hey, this happens to me. Does this happen to anyone else?
Yeah. So there's sort of just snippets from the survey, and it was anonymous, so I don't know who these people are. So I just got some actors or myself to speak the words, and it just sort of floats in and out of the videos.
Yeah, and I love that story you told when you gave your exhibition talk the other day too, about one of the participants, and this will lead into the paintings, who shared with you that for the longest time he couldn't read and didn't know how other people were reading because he was actually focusing on the space in between the letters. So that was the bit that his mind saw, which I'll let you speak to that, because that's kind of what that body of work is about, this difference that just changes everything if you see that way.
Yeah, so I suppose it's a bit like what do they call the magic eye?
Yeah.
Where if you look at it, it's just this abstract pattern, and then your mind, you suddenly all these images sort of come out of it when you unfocus your eyes or whatever you do. I can't do it, actually.
Interestingly, my dyslexic child can't do it either. So I wonder if there's something.
I don't know. That's all in the research project.
Yeah.
But what I was really interested is this friend said that he was looking at the white space, and then he realized that everyone was looking at the black space, the letters. And he said all of a sudden he just went, oh my God, that's reading.
Yeah.
All this time I've been looking at the wrong.
Who knew? Yeah.
So I was fascinated with this, and so what I did was with this series of paintings, which is one of my last series, which is called The Space Between, I looked at I painted, so I wrote all the words of my research on the canvas, and then I picked out the spaces in between the letters and with colour. And so you end up with this sort of patchwork kind of shimmery.
So subtle and beautiful.
Yeah. So they're very dark. I've used a dark background and then with white letters, and then, these blues and earthy tones, and I've kind of got a watery kind of feel again, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, no, there's this subtle undulation underneath a lot of your work. Like this really beautiful, graceful kind of undercurrent of flow.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at pulling together a exhibition where, because I worked in series that relate to the chapters, it was a different way for me to work. Normally I'll envisage the entire exhibition first in my mind's eye, and then I'll make the work as to fulfill that.
So do you have a preference for one way or the other, or was it just fun to play around with a different way? Did it affect your creativity at all working that way?
Well, I still worked in that way in terms of the chapters or the series, and then putting those series together, I was concerned that it would be too disparate, that there wouldn't be enough of a connection between the very different bodies of work, where I've got portraiture, I've got abstract paintings, I've got photographic work, video, and I was concerned that there wouldn't be enough of a thread.
But it works.
It works.
It really works.
And what I realised is the centre image, which is the oscillation of disclosure, which is it's a perspex tub, which is on the ground. It's sort of a tank, a tray, with water in it, and I've got a photograph of the two figures circling each other, and the figures have got red hair, and within the whole exhibition, I've got very subtle monotones, but they've got these flashes of red throughout it, pinks, reds, and oranges.
Yeah.
And
it works really well.
That pulls, because of the red hair, it pulls together. Suddenly your eye starts to tune in and see those flashes of red.
Yeah.
So I think that
visually tie it together. But also, I think there's something distinctly different about, you know, practice-led or based research exhibitions. And I've been to a few now. You would have been to a lot more than me. And particularly if you go to an artist talk and you hear, you know, the artist researcher talking about the process, there's so much depth to it, and there's so much, there's often underneath it something that's a really big cultural question in general that a lot of people wonder about. And it's always great to see exhibitions where people ponder and reflect on those experiences. But there's something very special about these exhibitions by researchers, because there's always this, there's a tremendous amount of scaffolding in terms of what the depth of research they've done, really, because it's an opportunity, a wonderful opportunity working that way to go really deep with a question and to really get into the nitty-gritty of the data around things as well. And I think yours is such a perfect example. Like, I have had many conversations with many people over the years about, you know, neurodiversity and artists, but yours was grounded in so much data and research alongside creative reflection for that extended period. It just has so much to it. Really, congratulations, because it's a beautiful exhibition.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think that the privilege of being able to immerse yourself in a practice for 3 years, for me it was 3 years, was I feel very fortunate to have that opportunity.
I do too.
Yeah,
we're very lucky in Australia.
Yeah, and I think I think it's really important, because I think that I've arrived. The knowledge that I've contributed wouldn't have been where it is without having that visual component.
Yeah.
Without that creative component, because if I was just writing a thesis that was just research, I would have arrived somewhere different. And feeding the research through my art practice meant that I was continually reflecting not only upon myself, but how does this, because the thing about art is it's about a communication. It's visually communicating complex ideas, and it's also about a dialogue or a conversation with the audience. So without the audience, does the art exist?
And doubly relevant when you're talking about dyslexia, because it can't just be about expression through words.
Exactly.
So it's like there's so many layers to it, and you're just like totally right. You can't be having that conversation just without the art. Like it enriches it. It just gives it a whole other dimension, doesn't it?
It does. It does give it another dimension, and I think it also it includes also, so people who aren't going to read a thesis, and there's quite a few of us, I've got another way to be able to have a conversation. And the conversations I have with people coming into the space, so sitting in the gallery on a Saturday when I do, and people come in and they, you know, I watch them walking around the space and I engage with them, and people are like, oh wow, you know, or they start to tell me about the story of their, you know, niece, or, you know, or themselves, or, you know, and I've had people who have just broken down crying.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. You know, I've never told anyone I'm dyslexic, or I think that I'm dyslexic, or I'm, you know, and, or, you know, neurodiverse in some way, you know, ADHD, autism, Tourette's, whatever it is. And it's a safe space.
Yeah, and art opens people up, doesn't it, to something they may not consider. So I think we've covered most of the main bodies of work.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we've missed? Mountain of Words.
Mountain of Words. Okay, so Mountain of Words was the first body of work apart from the video, I did the video first. Mountain of Words is a series of paintings. And one of the things that I was aware of, I wanted to go back to when I asked, what is dyslexia? And so a lot of the reading I was doing was, can't read, struggles at school, disengaged, blah, blah, blah. And I think that I wanted to express some of the challenges. And the challenges I saw my son going through, trying to learn to read, trying to engage in school, and the failure that he was constantly put under by the school system. And it was like for him having to scale a mountain. And even though I learned to read really early when I was young, my problem is, or my struggle is with spelling and pronunciation of words, auditory, sort of hearing a word and not being able to repeat it back. But I read it like I was constantly having my nose in a book. But I wanted to express that difficulty of what may seem really simple for some people is like a mountain for others.
So much kids that, can still do really well at school with neurodiversities, but they often have to work so much harder. Yeah, it's so true. And it can feel like a mountain.
And they get exhausted.
Yeah,
which is also what my book. So I wrote a little
picture book. Yeah, fabulous book. This is a woman that gets COVID and goes, shall I just lie around and have COVID, or shall I write a book?
I know that sort of, it makes me sound like I'm an overachiever.
I think you are what I would call a prolific artist. Like you just very naturally create art in all of the little nooks and crannies of life. It's just how you live your life, which is beautiful. I'm quite like that myself.
Yeah, you are.
So I really relate to that. Like it's just reflex. It's a reflex.
So when Susan and I met, and we just like instantly just started chattering, or just like, oh my God, you're like, it's been a really, really, really lovely experience.
Likewise.
Yeah. So,
but tell us about the book.
Oh, the book. Okay. So it's just it's a children's book, or it's written in the style of a children's book. So it's a picture book, and it's written in the similar vein to The Very Hungry Caterpillar.
Yeah.
So it's written actually for adults. It's written for parents and teachers and carers in the style of a children's book, so that hopefully they gain some insight into the challenges that children may experience at school. And so each day there's a new challenge for the child, and I've used my own paintings as textures to make the illustrations.
Yeah, because amongst all the other things, you are a graphic designer and she can do anything.
I can't do it. But I've worked for 25 years as a graphic designer. So putting a book together wasn't
you could very easily do that with COVID and your eyes closed and half your immune system shut down. But anyway,
I did. But I couldn't read. I couldn't do any research.
Well, there you go.
So it was fun. It was a really fun project, and now looking for a publisher.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So if you're a publisher, you need to get your eyes on this book.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to miss this opportunity because it often is overlooked, I find, in public art system and university art system. Kim's artwork and book is for sale. So if you would like to purchase any of this art, they can get it during the exhibition, I assume, through the gallery, subsequent to, and that will probably be pretty close to when this episode drops on your website? Or?
Yeah, so it's already on my website, so kimpercy.com, and my artwork is all available there for sale.
Great.
And
you also have an art gallery.
I do have I've got a community, so an artist-run space in Hepburn called Radius.
Yeah, Hepburn Springs here in our beautiful, where are we? Central Highlands.
We are in Central Highlands, yeah.
In Victoria.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for having a chat today. This has been so great. I've been to quite a few of your artist talks and things through this exhibition. I feel like every time there's sort of a new element comes out, and it's been such a pleasure to engage with your exhibition and your research and all the conversations we've had. And I have to tell you guys, this woman has been one of the most helpful people throughout the first year of my master's. Like, you have helped me so much. You're like my unofficial supervisor. Where would I be without Kim introducing me to metamodernism? But that is a story for another day. This is enough for today. But I feel like this isn't the last conversation we'll be
having. I would love to have more conversations. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
But my pleasure. Thank you for coming on, and thanks everyone for being here. Yes, you are. Where are you at on the socials? Kim Percy.
Kim Percy. Insta is Kim Percy Artist. Facebook is Kim Percy Artist, I think, as well, and LinkedIn, and also my website, kimpercy.com.
And we'll be sure to leave all of those links in the show notes, in the description to the video. And please reach out, because Kim loves to engage with people.
I do. So any questions about art, about dyslexia, neurodivergence, I'm always happy to have a chat.
All right. Thanks everyone for being here. We'll catch you next time. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.